Hello, everybody, and welcome to our roundtable discussion on the Great American Outdoors Act. It's really a pleasure to be here this afternoon with you. We will be going for about 30 minutes. At first, I want to set up some ground rules. And Amy, would you mind reminding people of how the Zoom works and the ground rules?
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. It's great to see you all. Just some guidelines and things to keep track of as we go into the Zoom meeting here. If you would like to raise your hand at the conclusion of the event for any questions and answers for the Q&A portion of our call, at the bottom of the Zoom call, you'll notice at the bottom of the tab, there's an option for participants. If you click that participant option, a box will pop up in the top right-hand corner where there's a little blue hand that you will select if you'd like to raise your hand. From there, we will go down the list and answer folks that have questions. Additionally, just as a reminder, if you're not speaking, to make sure that you are muted. If you plan on standing up or moving around, if you could please pause your video. We anticipate a smooth and very exciting roundtable discussion on the Great American Outdoors Act. And thank you all for joining us.
All right, thank you, Amy, and welcome everybody. My name is Camilla Simon, and I'm the Executive Director of Hispanics Enjoying Camping, Hunting, and the Outdoors. We are a group that elevates Hispanic leaders' voices and that increases the visibility of Hispanics in public lands policymaking and advocacy. We had our beginnings in New Mexico back in 2013 with the vision of building a platform to bring culture, querencia, which is a love for the land, and conservation of our shared natural resources to local, state, and national public lands conservation policy and advocacy efforts. Through HECHO, Hispanic voices are increasingly part of the conversation about conserving our land and water. We fought successfully with countless others for over 5 years to make the Land and Water Conservation Fund permanent. Now we are fighting for the Great American Outdoors Act. We at HECHO envision strong, culturally rich communities connected to nature and each other. In a state where people of Hispanic ancestry are 47% of the population, and where so many have strong cultural and historical connections to the landscapes, it is no wonder that 71% of New Mexicans support full, dedicated funding for the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Protecting outdoor traditions that are part of the cultural fabric of the Southwest depends on the conservation of our land and water. This in turn has many positive impacts for our health and well-being, for equitable access to the benefits of nature, community resiliency, and cultural preservation. That is why we need permanent full funding for our land and water, and why we also support funding to address the maintenance backlog of our national parks. That is why we need the Great American Outdoors Act. We are so thankful for a leader like Senator Udall, who has fought tirelessly and successfully to pass this bipartisan bill in the Senate last month. Today, we are standing alongside Senator Udall, small business, outdoor organizations, and local elected officials to build upon the historic victory in the Senate and remind the public that we still have work to do. We need to pass the Great American Outdoors Act in the House and get it signed into law. Today, we will be hearing from small business, outdoor organizations, and local elected officials. After everyone's remarks, there will be an opportunity for questions and answers. Please stay on the line once the last speaker has concluded their remarks, and we will open up the floor for questions. So with that, I will now turn it over to Kent Salazar. He's an HECHO board member and chairman-elect of the National Wildlife Federation. Kent?
Hi, good afternoon, or I guess wherever you're at. I just want to, first of all, start off with saying that HECHO, is very much in favor of this. We've been working on this for a long time. And I think keeping our outdoor resources high on the national agenda now is critical. Especially in this time of daunting challenges brought on by the pandemic. Our country's livability today and the prosperity in the future really depend on it. At stake is the health of our people, our communities, and the land and waters that they depend on. The Great American Outdoors Act has many benefits. Key among these is the fact that it's going to be providing full funding for the Land Water Conservation Fund. And this, I think, is one of the most critical conservation bills or laws that can be enacted. It's been in place for a long time, but it's never been fully funded. I think once we had a full funding of it, but it's been way underfunded. And this is a way to put people back to work and to save our lands, to build the health of our communities by having people, the ability for them to get out in nature. And nature has healing properties. And these are all critical things for our children. As well, the funds, the $900 million that would be added to the Land Water Conservation Fund would go toward conservation and recreation priorities. But these funds will help our economy, especially here in New Mexico. We have such a reliance on our outdoor. It's mostly severance fees from oil and gas. But one of our next big economies, and we need to diversify this with clean economy, is our outdoor, our $9.9 billion outdoor economy, which supports 99,000 jobs and payrolls of $2.8 billion. These all go toward businesses that work to support the 947,000 people that participate in wildlife viewing, hunting, fishing, hiking, and just enjoying the outdoors. So this legislation is really key, and I'm very proud that our senior Senator Udall, Tom Udall, has put this bill through and got it through the Senate, which is a big deal. And thank you, Senator. And I will go ahead and turn it over to you now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kent, and for that introduction, and thank you, HECHO, for this tremendous work. I must congratulate Kent on his recent election as chair-elect to the National Wildlife Federation Board of Directors. That's quite an honor. I'm glad to be a part of this panel, a panel of conservation advocates who have a lot to celebrate. After more than 55 years, we're on the verge of fully and permanently and finally funding the Land and Water Conservation Fund. That's $900 million every year that will be committed to expanding our parks, monuments, and wilderness, our state parks, and hiking, trails, bike paths. I mean, soccer fields, baseball fields, basketball courts, recreation centers. The Land and Water Conservation Fund does all of that. Pretty amazing. And that's $900 million that US taxpayers don't pay out. LWCF is funded mostly from revenues from oil and gas drilling in the Outer Continental Shelf. LWCF has been called our nation's most successful conservation program, and that's for good reason. In New Mexico, LWCF has contributed $332 million to federal and state projects since its inception, funding over 1,200 state projects in every single county in New Mexico, so every county is benefiting. And LWCF has supported public lands across the state, Bandelier, Chaco, the Gila, our newest national wildlife refuge, Valle del Oro, to name a few. Valle del Oro is the first urban wildlife refuge in the Southwest, located just south of Albuquerque. Valle del Oro gives kids, including many Hispanic kids, the opportunity to explore nature who otherwise might not get out. I hope that they will be future members of HECHO. I had fought for full and permanent funding for LWCF for a very long time, and I'm proud that my father helped lead the charge to establish the LWCF in the 1960s. And as lead Democrat on the Senate Appropriations Committee, on the Interior Subcommittee, I am pleased to have secured increased funding over the years, and I'm calling on the House of Representatives to pass the Senate's Great American Outdoors Act this month and get it to the President's desk for his signature. Full and permanent funding for LWCF comes as we face a nature crisis of epidemic proportions. We're in the middle of a sixth mass extinction. 1 million species are threatened over the next decades. In the US, we lose a football field's worth of nature every 30 seconds. Scientists tell us we need to save 30% of our lands and waters by 2030 to save nature. Nature meaning here our life support system. And I've introduced a resolution in the Senate to do just that. $900 million every year can go a long way to meet our goal. And finally, full and permanent funding for LWCF is not only a big win for conservation, it's a big win for economic growth, as Ken mentioned. Lots of jobs, lots of people out in the outdoors. Our nation's first priority right now is facing down the dual public health and economic crises brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. But make no mistake, LWCF and other conservation initiatives can be key to our economic recovery from COVID. And this bill puts down a substantial payment toward the maintenance backlog facing our public land. And the most significant commitment to maintaining our public lands ever made by Congress. In New Mexico alone, we have $121 million worth of deferred maintenance at our national parks and wildlife refuges and other areas, needing and iconic places. These are the places that need to be fixed up. Carlsbad Caverns, White Sands, Chaco, Gila cliff dwellings, and Bandelier. Expanding, restoring, and maintaining our public lands can be a massive job creator. There's just no doubt about it. And that job creation fuels the outdoor recreation industry. It's that industry in New Mexico, it's pretty amazing, is a $9.9 billion industry, much bigger than the budget for the state of New Mexico that is produced every year through the governor and the legislature working together. And that 9.9 billion brings in tourism dollars that support local restaurants, hotels, and retail shops. So let's take these wins and make the most of them in New Mexico. I'm especially proud to be joined by HECHO today for this discussion because I fully believe that our conservation work must be grounded in principles of equity, inclusion, and diversity. HECHO understands the strong connection Hispanic families have to our lands, waters, and wildlife. But too often, communities of colors have been left out of the conservation conversation. Even when communities of color face the worst effects of environmental damage and pollution, we must make sure the voices of Hispanic people and all people of color are heard as we move forward towards environmental justice and conserving and restoring our public lands. So let's move forward together. Let's encourage our great champions in the House to get this over the finish line. And with that, Camilla, let me hand this back to you. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much, Senator Udall. That was great. Really appreciate that. All right, I am going to introduce Carl Colonias. He will provide remarks. He is from the Enchanted Circle Trails Association. Carl, take it away.
Thank you, Camilla. So I'm happy to be able to join the call today, and thank you to HO, Senator Udall and his staff for the invitation to participate and help represent the interests of organizations and individuals in El Norte. I've been involved in public land projects for decades. I co-founded Rocky Mountain Youth Corps in 1995 and was the executive director until 2014 when I stepped away after 20 years. Today, I'm representing the Enchanted Circle Trails Association, or ECTA. ECTA is dedicated to the creation of a regional trail system in the Enchanted Circle to increase economic development through recreational tourism, positively affect community health by increasing access to trails, and improve the vitality of local communities in the region. We know that trails and public outdoor spaces attract visitors, new businesses, and even increase private property values. We also know that we have not aligned resources and made progress on meeting developing users' needs. An improved trail system also creates access to safe outdoor space designated for recreation, promotes physical activity and exercise, and is an asset for all members of the community, including children, seniors, diverse socioeconomic groups, and people with disabilities. Our partners in the Enchanted Circle, both the local municipalities and federal land management agencies, the Carson National Forest and the Taos Field Office of the Bureau of Land Management, are under resources and struggle to budget for investments in trail development. The Carson National Forest even asks that private groups like ECTA raise private resources to fund required environmental assessments for projects. The opportunities to incorporate resources made available through the Great American Outdoors Act is very exciting. The Cuesta to Red River Trail will link the two communities along New Mexico 38, providing an opportunity to entrepreneurs to initiate small businesses like bike rentals or food stands in Cuesta, or provide additional clientele to snack bar producer Taos Bakes, or special places like the Red River Brewery. For a community like Cuesta that is recovering from the permanent closure of the Molycorp mine, outdoor recreation is one of their economic development strategies, and a destination trail like the Cuesta to Red River Trail would be an economic multiplier. ECTA is also engaged in designing an enhanced trail system in the forest just east of Taos, the Tulpa Ridge Trail System. These new trails will support additional users through sustainable trail design, stacked loops, equestrian parking capacity, and some purpose-built mountain bike trails. These efforts create an easily accessible recreational destination that will complement the IMBA Epic South Boundary Trail and other fantastic trails, and cascade into increased gross receipts taxes in surrounding communities over time. So from fishing guides, bike and gear shops, coffee shops, local eateries, local hotels, bed and breakfasts, and VRBOs throughout the Enchanted Circle, we're excited about seeing some project dollars to build out the Enchanted Circle Trail Plan to meet local and recreational visitor needs. And again, thank you for inviting me to participate on this panel.
Fabulous. Thank you, Carl. We are going from the north and will now be going to the south of New Mexico. I'd like to introduce Matt Mason of the Southern New Mexico Trails Alliance. Matt, take it away.
Hi, thanks for having me. Thanks, Senator Udall, for all the work you do for our public lands. It means a lot to people here in Southern New Mexico. It's changed the nature of Las Cruces and how we recreate and interact with the land to have the new wilderness areas, the new national monuments. That's made a big change for a lot of people in town, and I'm looking forward to seeing that go forward with the LWCF stuff. When I looked at the list of projects from Doñana County that have been accomplished with LWCF funds, it's essentially a list of amenities of why I like living here and raising a family here. So to know there's going to be more of that in the future is all the more reason to stay. I'm fortunate enough personally that I get to spend a lot of time in the backcountry of OMP, hiking and biking and climbing the peaks there. A lot of people aren't. So is how do we get the monument itself to sort of come in towards town? Some of these areas that weren't in the initial designation, like Tenuco Mountain, the East Mesa, Tortugas Mountain, that people use every day and are much more accessible. They're in neighborhoods or on the edge of neighborhoods, getting those areas protected to sort of be a buffer between town and the monument. The big project I'm working on with the Friends of Organ Mountains and Southern New Mexico Trail Alliance is the Monumental Loop. It's a 350-mile loop that explores all of OMDP, the prehistoric Trackways National Monument. There's several cultural and historical sites along the way, and it happens to border now 9 of the 10 new wilderness areas. So this is a bike and hiking route that I published in 2016, shortly after the monument designation, and immediately people came from across the country and across North America to come experience this route through the monument. Local people have been slower to adopt it. So with a series of shorter gravel rides and hikes, we've sort of convinced them that the monument and the magic of the Las Cruces position in the monument is that we're surrounded by 500,000 acres of protected land that's accessible by foot or by bike, often in many cases using what we have lovingly called the ditches of Doña Ana, the ditch banks that supply water to farmers, are great corridors to get us from downtown to the monument. So we're sort of thinking in the long term, if those areas were protected, they would provide direct physical connection to people's neighborhoods and schools and businesses directly to the monument. That's sort of the big push right now. And I'm thinking this Great American Outdoors Act is going to continue to push Las Cruces forward as being a destination for outdoor activities. And I'm grateful for all the work that you all do. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Matt. That was wonderful. All right, and now we'll hear from Santa Fe City Councilor Renee Villarreal. Renee?
Thank you, everybody. It's great to be with you today on Facebook Landia, and also a guest with part of this panel. I'm just honored to be with Senator Udall. Good to see you on the screen, and to all of my colleagues at HECHO, as well as leaders across New Mexico. Just wanted to thank you for this invitation. I think many of us know we'd rather right now be out in the parks and outdoor recreational areas that have been funded through the Land and Water Conservation Fund, but we are here instead talking about the importance of that fund. So at least we are inside virtually talking about, for a good cause, talking about LWCF. I just wanted to mention that because City of Santa Fe is known very much for, and we boast the fact that we have 70 parks and excellent facilities across our city, we also have to recognize that many of those have actually been funded through the Land and Water Conservation Fund through the years. And it's interesting to see the list that was given to us, how many in the past have been able to be funded through that fund. When I look at it though, I do recognize that the funding actually that existed happened in the 60s and 70s that funded many of our facilities and parks. And so I guess I would like to use this platform to be able to ask if Senator Udall's office and other supporters of the LWCF would like to look at possibly looking at the criteria of the usage of this fund, so that maybe some of that funding could then be reallocated for the maintenance, the upkeep and possible enhancement of existing parks and facilities that were previously funded through the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And I say that because the City of Santa Fe, as well as other municipalities, were impacted greatly by the recession in 2008. And we had to defer maintenance quite a bit back then for our parks and recreational facilities. And now that we have a looming economic crisis happening, and we will be in a $100 million budget deficit for the City of Santa Fe due to the pandemic crisis, we would like to look at other funding opportunities that would help us fund existing parks that were funded through the Land and Water Conservation Fund. So I think those are some things to consider. They may not be currently on the track because most of this funding is looking at new facilities or parks, but I would like to see if there was a way to look at existing facilities. As I said, the majority of our funding, our parks and rec facilities were funded through the Land and Water Conservation Fund back in the 60s, 70s, and part of the 80s. And so I just want to make sure that we continue having those parks accessible for our constituents, especially during this time of pandemic. These recreational facilities and our parks are so important right now for the health and well-being and just self-care for our residents and visitors. It's just extremely important to be able to have facilities that can nurture us in a time that's extremely stressful. There's a lot of unknowns and uncertainty and fear. And so I look to our national parks as well and public lands to be able to support us during this time. And I guess when I think about the rescoping or ways to look at deferred maintenance, it's similar to how the National Parks and Public Lands Legacy Restoration Fund functions. It supports, as Senator Udall was mentioning, the deferred maintenance on federal lands. So hopefully we can look at how the funding can support local projects in that deferred maintenance. And just wanted to stress the importance that we're all hoping that we all appreciate the fact that our parks, our federal lands, public lands are such an important piece right now during a time, like I said, that's, you know, it's a stressful and emotional time. And so I personally go and look to our national parks, especially the Santa Fe National Forest, which was funded through the Land and Water Conservation Fund, in order to be able to have a way to escape from the virtual field that we work in right now. So thank you all for your time, and thanks for this platform.
Great. Thank you, Councilwoman Villarreal. All right. So again, going from the northern part of the state to the southern part of the state, I'd like to welcome Roswell City Councilor Judy Stubbs.
Thank you so very much. This is certainly my pleasure, as I'm sure it is, as we've said, for all of us to be a part of this. I'm very appreciative. I can't tell you what an important investment this has been in the past, and certainly will continue now in the future, to all of southeastern New Mexico. Roswell is sort of the hub of southeastern New Mexico, the largest city in Chaves County. We have 3 other very small incorporated municipalities who themselves have been able to take advantage of funds that have come through the Land and Water Conservation Fund, helping us all with things like school playgrounds and city parks and soccer fields, baseball fields, even senior centers, and recreational areas within the communities that allow our youth to also exercise and expand their interest, which I think is incredibly important. I grew up in Albuquerque, but I grew up in a family that was very interested in the outdoors and took advantage of fishing and hiking in northern New Mexico, which was wonderful. Even though I'm now here in the southern part of the state, we were able to give our children the same opportunity. And now I'm watching my grandchildren enjoy these public spaces. And I'm so appreciative that that opportunity is here. The southeastern New Mexico, especially Roswell, lives a lot off of tourism. It's probably one of the most important industries, clean industries that we have here in southeastern New Mexico. And the money that have gone into these kinds of facilities that I've just mentioned have certainly enhanced tourism and the reputation of New Mexico, I think, in other parts of the country. So this has been a wonderful opportunity. I think it's good for the next generation to understand how important it is to not only save nature, but the endangered species of animals and plants. And this is helping to do that by providing a greater opportunity to purchase and to enhance public lands. From a city perspective, from a government perspective, we are able to garner other funds through matching funds. And this has typically been a great match for areas, for the area in southeastern New Mexico to acquire other funds. And I think another thing that's so important to the list that has funded within Roswell and all of Chaves County is the fact that very few, if any, of the projects on this list over the past many years requires an entry fee or some kind of even contribution to attend. So because of these funds and the funds that are now permanently designated, I think so many people in New Mexico that may not have typically been able to will continue to be able to enjoy and prosper from these wonderful facilities and activities So I too would like to thank you, Senator Udall, for your kindness and your friendship and this opportunity. And I appreciate so much what everyone that is speaking today is doing on behalf of New Mexico citizens. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, finally, we have our last of our panelists, Kevin Dahl with the National Parks Conservation Association Southwest Region. Kevin? Could you unmute yourself?
Unmute.
Sorry, rookie mistake. My organization's 1.4 million members and supporters strongly support the entire Great American Outdoors Act, and thank you, Senator Udall. Today, I want to sing the praises for the section of this bill that will provide funding to help resolve the long-standing backlog of repairs and maintenance at our national parks and other public lands. It would provide $1.9 billion over the next 5 years. There are 400 plus parks, monuments, and other sites in the national park system, with 15 in New Mexico. Many of them, most of them in fact, have lately experienced record visitation while lacking adequate funding to deal with the crumbling infrastructure. Now, things have changed a little bit with the current pandemic, but there are now new needs to make sure that staff and visitors are safe when they visit the national parks. So repair and maintenance just doesn't deal with historic park buildings. It includes such things as inadequate restroom facilities, unsafe electrical systems, pothole-filled roads, crowded staff housing, cultural sites that need to be stabilized and protected. So when this bill becomes law, what could we see happen in New Mexico? Well, at El Malpai National Monument, the temporary visitor center there could be replaced with a permanent structure. Archaeological sites at Bandelier and Chaco Canyon could receive that much needed stabilization and protection. Our newest national park, White Sands, which you see behind me, could use $1 million of this money to fence its new borders since lands were added to it when it became a national park. But let's look closely at the needs of our most well-known park. At Carlsbad Caverns, clearing the deferred maintenance backlog would mean updating, restoring, and securing the superintendent's buildings, the cavern trail, and 28 buildings with historic value, all built in the early to mid 20th century. Restoring the cavern trail is an urgent need to preserve cultural and ecological resources of these caves. It would allow the resurfacing of walkways, proactively laying conduit all down the trail with communication receivers regularly placed for visitors' safety and ranger communication. This would also involve removing asphalt and epoxy that was used in the past and using concrete instead, which is a material more similar to the limestone in the cave. Passage of the Great American Outdoors Act, and we share, Senator, your concern that the House get on with it, means visitors at our national parks would be better served with improved parking lots, updated water, sewer, electrical systems. Roads, both paved and administrative dirt roads and back roads, would be easier on the vehicles that travel them. Well-used hiking trails would be safer and less prone to erosion. And we'll breathe easier knowing that these treasured places are being well stewarded for all Americans, for now and for the future, for our children and their children as well. Again, thank you, Senator, for your effort, your long-term effort in this and other conservation measures. Proud to be part of the team that's getting the job done.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, now I'm going to pass it back to Senator Udall for some closing thoughts, and then we'll have questions and answers.
Thank you, Camilla, and thank you to all the panelists. This were wonderful statements, heartfelt, and I think really help us get this legislation through the Congress. Hispanic people throughout the West and Westerners as a whole have a deep respect and love for the outdoors and for nature. But nature is under a threat like never before. While we celebrate the win of full and permanent funding for the Land and Water Conservation Fund, we must use this as an opportunity to commit ourselves to saving nature and our planet as we know it. While we face the public health and economic devastation of this pandemic, we must use this as an opportunity to boost the well-documented physical and emotional health benefits of nature and get people outside. And use this as an opportunity to use conservation as a tool to reinvigorate our economy. Now is the time to think big and think bold. We can tackle the nature crisis, take on the climate crisis, a major contributor to nature destruction, and create a sustainable economy, all while ensuring a more equitable, diverse, and inclusive playing field. Let's do this, and let's do this together. Back to you, Camilla.
Super. Yes, I agree. Let's do this. Thank you, Senator Udall, and thank you to all of our panelists. You were wonderful and making a very strong case for this. Now, we have a few more minutes for some questions. So to ask a question, the Zoom meeting has a raise hand function. To raise your hand, you'll have to click on participants, which is located at the bottom middle section of your Zoom screen. And then when you click that, a new box will pop up on the right. And at the bottom of that box is a blue raise hand button. So, okay, if you have a question, please raise your hand on the Zoom. And then you can also chat a question into the chat box, as well as if you're on the phone and you're not on the screen, I'm gonna leave a moment open for you to unmute yourself and just say hello and your name and your affiliation. All right, and while we're waiting, since it doesn't seem like anybody has an immediate question, I'm going to ask an initial question to our city leaders. And Councilwoman Villarreal, you had touched on this a little bit, so maybe I'll ask this to you first. How important is the Land and Water Conservation Fund in leveraging city resources to support your goals related to public parks and open spaces?
Thanks for the question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's crucial for leveraging funding sources. The Land and Water Conservation Fund is the piece of the puzzle to be able to keep up and have any kind of public spaces that are accessible, especially equitable spaces. And when I say leveraging it, it helps us not only with supporting the shortfalls I was talking about earlier in terms of our budget shortfalls, but it also helps us leverage other funding sources from the state. I think in some cases we've had some individual donors be able to enhance certain aspects of parks, whether they're adding a dog park or fencing around one park that was already existing through the LWCF. I think it ends up getting the community involved and wanting to participate and support our parks and facilities. So I think that that's how, for us in the city of Santa Fe, it leverages funds.
Camilla, could I just say a word on that?
Yeah, sure, go right ahead.
You hear me? She's hit on a very important point. As I've traveled New Mexico and I've met with the park directors, I asked them, these are city, county, state park directors. I say, what makes a real difference to you? And they say the certainty of having money come every year. And that's why the Land and Water Conservation Fund, half of it was designed to go to the state and the localities. And what ends up happening, if they know the money's coming, they can plan as their communities grow and try to leverage other money, as Renee's talking about. And when you have it be 100 million one year and 400 million another year and almost down to zero another year, they are very discouraged. I walk into those offices and they say, we can't rely on you, so it's very hard to plan. And when we're putting in a new development, we want to have parks, but your money's just not available to us. So that's the important point about having 900 million and having it there every year.
Yes, that is important. I think I've heard that too. And I'm not in city government, but yes, understanding and planning is probably key to all of this. Being able to count on that funding is helpful. Roswell City Councilor Judy Stubbs, do you have an answer to that question as well?
I appreciate that question because it is critical. I think that's what I meant by having a permanent fund that allows us to have matching funds to as we said, leverage other monies. Let me tell you, it is so important to have green space down here in southeastern New Mexico, which is desert land. It's we're actually still in a semi-drought, and other than today, which it's currently 110 degrees here in Roswell, so I'm very thankful to be in here discussing this with all of you instead of outside. But typically having the green space in a desert is critical. And I have to echo, Senator, what you said, knowing that there's a permanent fund there that's going to continue to help municipalities as well as out in the counties. The perpetuation of green space is critically important. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right. I don't see a question or a raised hand in the chat participant box at this point, but I'll try another thing. If you would like to just, and if you're on the Zoom, you can unmute yourself. I'll also open that up since it may be harder for people to do the raised hand feature. So I'll leave a little bit of space, a few seconds to chime in. So feel free to unmute yourself and say hello and introduce yourself with your name and affiliation.
This is Kent again with HECHO, and I just wanted to say that I see that same thing happening when people, when the cities and the communities don't have the certainty of the funding, they cannot plan projects. So we have not seen projects occurring. So there's been a big drop off in those things. Not just maintenance, I mean actual improvements and things. And in Santa Fe, the river project, I worked on that at one time, and then the money went away, and they put the plans away, and then there were several stages and nothing else happened. So with the certainty of this funding, planners in communities and forests and parks and these trails, people are talking about trails, they can make plans, they can improve things. So this is very important.
Great, thank you, Kent. And I guess just speaking of that, I'd like to go back to Matt and Carl, just to ask you a follow-up question about what are some of the specific opportunities you see for small business or other benefits to your local community, and you know, if Congress were to pass and it were to become law. Why don't we go with Carl?
Sure. Yeah, the idea that trails, open space creates a vital community. One of the things that people look at when they're locating to a new community is, you know, well, what are the recreational opportunities? What are the assets? That really helps people make a decision about what is an attractive community. But we're not just building trails for visitors. The idea that trails make a more livable community for local residents as well. One of the pieces that we haven't talked about is the increase in community health indicators. Really looking at a healthier, more vital population. That's incredibly important in these times to allow people to get outside, to exercise, and to take trail systems to where people live and work. Can be an incredibly expensive endeavor. There are a lot of trails in the backcountry, although they need a good amount of investment as well. But how do we create an opportunity to connect the public lands to where the population spends their time? Linkage trails from a community along a roadside, or using a green space in order to build a link to connect the population to public lands is incredibly important, and helps people think about the community in a different way. as a more vital community, you're going to have that entrepreneurial spirit. You're going to see coffee shops, and the joke is that road bikers will drink more cappuccino, and mountain bikers will drink more beer. So the more trails you have, think about those coffee shops and micro pubs.
I love that. Thank you, Carl. All right. Matt Mason,
Yes.
would you like to answer that question as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think Carl pretty well summed it up. But yeah, the trails in this community, especially, we don't have that many. I think there's 95 official miles of trail in the monument. But in town, like I said, we have these ditches that were essentially going unused for many years. The city is talking about improving a few of them, but they connect directly from town to the monument. So I've been showing people these routes and saying, hey, if you're going to this area, let's take this route on a ditch. And it's opening up people's minds to not what we need to invest in, or maybe we do, but what we already have here, and sort of being proud of the existing infrastructure. It's a little bit humble and it's dirt right now, but being proud of what we have and feeling like this is a place that has something to offer my family, and this is a place where I could run a business. Because the monument and the wilderness areas have changed town completely in the last decade. There was no real outdoor culture here. People weren't in the mountains. And now when I ride Sierra Vista Trail, it's families on the side of the trail having barbecues and picnics. And I don't have any hard economic data, but all of that stuff where people are feeling better and getting outside, all of that is going to add to, like Carl said, people wanting to live here and to stay here. So instead of my young friends with families moving away to other towns, they're seeing that the wilderness is happening, that trails are being built, and they're thinking differently about Las Cruces. So it's sort of putting us on the map, at least, you know, regionally, as a place to come and explore. So that's been huge for Las Cruces. And there are business, like Carl said, coffee shops and breweries and Oregon Mountain Outfitters, you know, tons of businesses are sort of capitalizing on the public lands here.
And I have one last question. Kevin Dahl, you explained some of the specific pieces that could be done on our national parks. I was just wondering, how big of an impact do you see this guaranteed funding having on the ground at these special places for the backlog maintenance portion of the Great American Outdoors Act?
Park Service superintendents and managers are very excited about having a larger pot of money to deal with problems that they are intimate with at their parks, and have to do all sorts of workarounds. I've been told it would be like 4 or 5 times amount of money available that they normally can apply for these key maintenance projects. And, you know, as people who live in homes, we can understand when you put off a maintenance problem, it just becomes more and more expensive to eventually deal with it. So it's great that we'll spend the next 5 years tackling the most important, you know, repairs that have been deferred. And it will have great impact on the safety of the staff, the enjoyment of visitors, and the protection of both the natural resources at some of these parks and the cultural resources as well.
Great, thank you, Kevin. All right, well, I didn't see any questions come in. Please let me know right now. Just double checking. Okay, no other questions here. So that about wraps it up. Thank you for joining our roundtable today. Thank you, Senator Udall, and to each of our panelists, thank you for the time today. If anybody has additional questions or would like to get in touch with any of our panelists, please let us know. Thank you.